I remember the first time I saw the house. I was only 7 years old. My parents, still young themselves, had just bought their first home. I had despised the cramped, dim apartment where we used to live. So when I stepped through the front door of our new house, I was overwhelmed with excitement. It felt enormous compared to the tiny space we had left behind. I ran upstairs, eager to claim my own room, no longer forced to share with my baby brother. As I explored every corner of my new home, I finally made my way down to the basement. Unlike the rest of the house, which was warm and inviting, the basement felt entirely different. Cold, sterile, unwelcoming. The air smelled damp and sour. The concrete floor rough beneath my feet. Overhead, a web of rusted pipes twisted at unnatural angles, casting jagged shadows along the walls. And then there were the stairs. Encased by drywall, they seemed strangely out of place. One section of the wall looked off, discolored, uneven. It stood out, like a wound in the otherwise pristine space. I inched closer and ran my fingers over its surface. It felt wrong, different from the rest. When I knocked, a hollow sound echoed through the empty basement. Something about that sound filled me with unease. I turned and hurried up the stairs, my footsteps sending that same hollow sound reverberating behind me. It followed me, like an unseen presence keeping pace. Over the weeks, I grew accustomed to the house, everywhere except the basement. I avoided it whenever I could. Something about it unsettled me. My parents were happy, doting over me and my brother, Jonathan. Life felt perfect. Then, the noises started. At first, they were small things, faint creaks, distant knocks. My parents dismissed them as the house settling. I tried to believe them. Then, one night, I woke up thirsty and crept downstairs to the kitchen for a drink. As I shut the refrigerator door, a sharp sound cut through the silence. A rhythmic tapping. My body froze. My ears strained to locate the source. It was coming from the basement. A cold dread seeped into my bones as I turned toward the basement door. Slowly, I reached for the knob and pulled it open. Darkness gaped before me. Then, tap, tap, tap. The sound was unmistakable. The same hollow knock I had made on the odd patch of drywall. My breath caught in my throat. Summoning every ounce of courage, I switched on the basement light and placed one foot on the first step. The tapping continued. I couldn't do it. My courage shattered. I fled back to my room, diving under the covers, praying for morning to come quickly. The next day, I woke early and raced downstairs, eager to escape the memory of the night before. As I passed the basement door, my stomach twisted. It was closed. I knew. I had left it open in my panic, and I had never turned off the light. But now, the door stood shut, as if nothing had happened. When I told my parents, they brushed it off. Just the hot water heater clicking, they said. I wanted to believe them. A month later, my mother asked me to fetch some socks from the dryer in the basement. It was the middle of the day. Safe. Ordinary. I told myself there was nothing to fear. The basement light buzzed to life as I stepped onto the stairs, the familiar hollow sound echoing beneath my feet. Halfway down, a rancid odor hit me. My parents had mentioned a dead mouse. They planned to find and remove it soon. I hurried to the dryer, stuffing socks into a basket. Then, as I shut the door, the silence pressed down on me. It felt wrong. Then, I heard it. A whisper, faint, almost imperceptible. My skin prickled as I turned my head, straining to hear. It was coming from beneath the stairs. The murmur was growing, too low to understand, but undeniably there. Then, it stopped. My heart pounded as I turned toward the stairs. My eyes flicked to the discolored patch of drywall. Then, A sound shattered the silence. A loud, hollow bang. The stairs trembled beneath me. I nearly lost my footing. A breathless terror gripped me as I tore up the stairs, bursting into daylight, shaking and sobbing. My parents tried to console me, but nothing they said could ease the dread coiling in my chest. I refused to ever enter that basement again. They never asked me to. 3 months later, on the night of July 2nd, 1991, my world ended. Jonathan vanished. A ransom note appeared in his crib, scrawled in barely legible English, demanding $20,000. It warned my parents not to call the police or he would be killed. My mother and father argued late into the night, their voices raw with fear and grief. The police were called. My parents followed the instructions exactly, dropping off the money, waiting at the designated pickup spot. Jonathan never came home. My mother collapsed into despair, blaming herself for calling the police. My once vibrant father withered into a shadow. And me? I never stopped thinking about the basement. I told my mother my theory, that something had taken Jonathan from inside the house, from under the stairs. She slapped me, hard, screamed at me to stop the childish nonsense. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to sleep. We moved shortly after. My parents' marriage crumbled. My mother took her own life a year later. My father and I tried to move on, but Jonathan's absence was a wound that never healed. 20 years passed. I couldn't let it go. One night, drunk and desperate for closure, I broke into our old house. It was vacant. The basement stairs groaned beneath my weight. The drywall, still discolored, still unnatural, loomed before me, summoning all my strength. I hurled myself at the wall. It crumbled. Bones. Dozens of tiny bones. A grotesque pile of skeletal remains lay before me. I choked back bile as I took in the horror. Small frames, tattered bits of cloth. I stumbled backward, my foot striking something. A trapdoor. With trembling hands, I pried it open. A dark tunnel stretched beneath the house. The stench of decay poured out. I crawled through, emerging on the other side of the basement stairs, behind the old dryer. My mind reeled. Then, the lights flickered out. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Someone, something, was descending the stairs. A whisper slithered through the darkness, incomprehensible yet terrifyingly familiar. I bolted. I didn't dare look back. The police unearthed the remains of over 30 children. Among them, Jonathan. I felt relief. My father, too. The not knowing had tormented us for decades. But the thing that keeps me up at night isn't what we found. It's what we didn't. The thing that lived beneath those stairs. It's still out there. I was home alone for the week while my family was on vacation, and I had to work. It was around 2 a.m., and I had stayed up in the dark basement to watch a scary movie, determined to push my own limits of terror, while still knowing I was safe in my own home. Then, I heard pounding footsteps on the first floor. When my family is around, their footsteps passing by the basement door in the front hallway are a common sound. But this time, the noise sent a jolt of fear through me. My immediate reaction was to turn off the television. The basement door, a flight of steps in a corner away, was shrouded in darkness. Whoever was out there would have seen no light. I distinctly heard the basement door handle click and turn as I sat in absolute darkness. I moved slowly and silently, crawling behind our large television. As I edged past, I noticed with mounting panic that its black screen still faintly glowed. Then, I heard footsteps coming down the creaky, carpeted stairs. I froze in my hiding spot, straining to listen. For several long minutes, Nothing happened. Had the intruder seen the afterglow of the television? Or had it faded? Was someone standing silently in the pitch black, listening for any sound? I lay there in what felt like an eternity, my initial terror gradually giving way to confusion. Could I really have heard an intruder? How could someone remain so utterly silent for so long, without any shuffling, breathing, or any other sound? If there were an intruder, they must still be in the basement. The creaky stairs and the clicking door handle should have betrayed their presence if they had learned to muffle their movements. I began counting in my head to pass the time, careful not to swallow or make any noise, as even the smallest sound could betray me. 60 seconds, then another 60. Over and over, I estimated I had been crouched in complete darkness for nearly 2 hours with no further noise. Yet, if someone were here, none of this made sense. Finally, I decided I had to make a move. If I did nothing, the sunrise would soon break through the small basement windows, and even worse, a horrible cloying odor began to fill the air. Cautiously, I started inching toward the stairs along the wall. If someone was lurking in the dark, I hoped I could sneak around them and make a quiet escape up the stairs. The repulsive smell grew stronger with every step, suggesting that something had died down here during the night. No living person could exude such an odor. Terrible images of a corpse-like figure, waiting silently in the darkness, flooded my thoughts, and I moved as quickly as I could without making a sound. Just as I finally reached the stairs, a tremendous clatter erupted, as if something had fallen or collapsed onto the floor. That was the moment I leaped forward, crashing up the stairs and bolting through the open basement door and out the front door. Now, convinced that someone was in the house, I called the police from my cell phone and watched the house from a distance. The police arrived, conducted a search of the premises, and then returned, their faces grim as they questioned me. They had found a body in the house, my elderly neighbor, who appeared to have died from a heart attack. Their theory was that I must have left the front door unlocked, allowing him to wander in while dying, searching for help. At first, I felt terrible, believing I had spent those dreadful moments while an old man perished just a few feet away. But then it struck me. What was that loud clatter that had spurred me to flee the house? I asked the police, and they confirmed that the back door had also been left open, with a single, bare footprint in the mud nearby. Somehow, for reasons I will never understand, there was someone else in that basement with us, silent, waiting, and listening in the dark above the fresh corpse of an old man. There was always something off about the basement in our house. The air was colder, heavier, and there was a constant sense of being watched. It wasn't the kind of place you'd want to spend much time in. But my dad kept the extra fridge down there, and I was the one who was usually tasked with getting whatever food or drink we needed late at night. I didn't mind it at first. After all, what could be so scary about a basement? But that changed one night. It was past midnight, and the house was completely still. Everyone had gone to bed. My sister was curled up in her room, too scared to even go near the stairs, and my parents were deep in their sleep. I needed a drink of water, so I reluctantly headed downstairs, my mind running through all the ways I could get in and out of the basement without feeling like a scared little kid. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, something felt off. The basement light was already on. My heart skipped a beat. My parents were asleep, so I knew I hadn't left it on. I tried to brush it off as nothing, telling myself maybe I had. But the moment I stepped down into the basement, I had this weird sensation, a pull, almost like something was waiting. At the far end of the basement, near the furnace, I saw it. A shadow. It wasn't cast by anything in the room, but it was there, standing tall, unmoving. It was darker than the surrounding shadows, as if it had no business being there at all. It was featureless, just a black shape against the dim light. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It felt wrong, like my very presence was disturbing something that didn't belong in the world of the living. I couldn't move. My body locked in place, and then the light flickered. I flinched, reaching instinctively for the light switch, but the basement plunged into complete darkness, the kind of darkness where you feel like something is about to grab you from the shadows. Then I heard it, bare feet slapping against the cold concrete floor. Fast. It was running toward me, getting closer, and my body reacted before my brain had a chance to process the danger. I bolted. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, not even daring to look back. My feet stumbled over the steps, but I didn't care. I slammed the basement door shut, locked it, and pressed my back against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart was racing, and every instinct told me to stay away from that basement forever. When I told my parents, they dismissed it. "You probably just had a bad dream," my mom said, trying to comfort me. But I knew it wasn't a dream. The basement felt wrong now, always watching, always waiting. The next morning, I was too scared to go down there, but my dad asked me to get something out of the fridge. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the pitch-black space. Something had changed. The air was colder now, and I felt like I was being drawn in. I had no choice. Slowly, I descended the stairs again, my hand trembling on the railing. When I reached the bottom, my breath caught in my throat. The light was on again, and the fridge door, it was wide open. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. But I could feel something else, something more sinister, lingering in the shadows. A gnawing dread crawled up my spine as I stood, frozen in place, staring at the open fridge. I didn't want to look, but I had to. My eyes flicked down toward the floor, and that's when I saw it. Small, wet footprints leading away from the fridge. Bare footprints, like someone, or something, had been walking around the basement in the dark. A sharp rap came from somewhere deep in the basement. My body tensed. I wasn't alone down there. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the door behind me slammed shut. The basement light flickered out, and I was left in complete darkness once again. I backed away as fast as I could, my hand scrambling to find the door handle. I rushed up the stairs, almost tripping in my haste. My heart was pounding, my mind was spinning. What was down there? Why was it getting worse? I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. Not after what happened that night. But after that, I couldn't go near the basement again without feeling that cold presence. The footsteps, the shadow, the feeling of being watched from the dark. And every time I went downstairs, no matter how brief the trip, I could feel it waiting for me. The basement wasn't just a basement anymore. It was something far worse. So a bit of a backstory. My parents got divorced in 1997. I was born in 1990, so I was 7 at the time. Though they stayed on good terms, my mom moved into my grandparents' old house. My grandparents had a lot of money and had recently moved without selling the house, so they had no problem letting my mother and us move in. We ended up living there for about 5 years. It was me, my mom, my 2 older sisters, and our dog. The house had 3 floors: the ground floor, the basement, and the upper floor, where my sisters and I slept. The basement was the most horrific part of the house. The stairs leading from the basement spiraled up to the first floor and then continued to the second. Most of the time, the stairs creaked and groaned with every step. Several times a week, we would hear footsteps slowly climbing from the basement, pausing on the ground floor, and then continuing upward to the second floor. The steps would often stop outside one of our rooms, usually my older sister's room, though sometimes it would stop outside mine or my middle sister's room. We all heard it. My mom didn't like to talk about it, but my sisters and I would often talk about it the next day, confirming that we had all heard the same thing. We all dreaded going down to the basement. It was a huge, dark place that you'd think children would enjoy exploring, but we hated it. Our dog refused to go down there too. She hated it just as much as we did. There were always strange little things happening in the basement. Lights flickering off randomly, objects moving by themselves, and eerie noises, like things being shuffled around when no one was down there. One evening, my sisters and I were playing with our walkie-talkies, trying to tune into the local police channel, like kids did in the 90s. This time, the voice we heard on the walkie-talkie sounded different, closer, like it was right next to us. It spoke directly to my oldest sister, telling her it was going to hurt her. It even called her by name. It never answered our questions, though. Terrified, we turned off the walkie-talkie. A moment later, our dog ran into the room, barking frantically at nothing. Our dog, a large and protective animal, never behaved like this before or after. She stayed in the room, barking and growling into the empty air. Another time, my mom and I were home, alone. My sisters and the dog were away. I was playing in my room, and my mom was doing whatever moms do. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps coming from the basement. They were loud, as if someone was running up the stairs. The footsteps continued, climbing up to the second floor, then stopping outside my room. My heart stopped when I heard them. My mom doesn't walk that heavily or angrily. The footsteps continued until they reached my door, and then it slammed. The door rattled, and I screamed, terrified. My mom rushed upstairs, trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it was locked, but I knew the door didn't have a lock. My mom told me to stay calm as she ran downstairs to find something to break the door open. I was crying uncontrollably. While she was downstairs, the door suddenly unlocked on its own, and it swung open. One night, while my sisters and the dog were away, there was a storm, and for some reason, I became absolutely terrified of the thunder. I had never been afraid of storms before or after, but that night was different. As the storm raged, things in the basement began to go crazy. We heard glass shattering, and when we checked in the morning, we found broken glass and objects scattered across the floor. There were footsteps running up and down the stairs. My mom and I clung to each other, terrified of what was happening. At one point, we were sitting in the living room, trembling, when the front door suddenly slammed open, then closed again. It opened and closed repeatedly for several minutes, but the storm outside wasn't strong enough to explain it. There were many other strange things that happened, but these are the most vivid memories. It seemed to intensify whenever our dog wasn't around, and it always seemed to target my older sister. She had far more experiences than I did. On a few occasions, she claimed to have seen an old man standing by her bed, watching her sleep. I go to school in a large city, one of the least safe in the U.S. I chose this school for nursing, not because of its location, which, looking back, was a mistake. I live off campus in a row house with 4 other girls. We thought it was cheaper and nicer than the dorms. But I guess you get what you pay for. We're all sophomores in college. Like most college girls, we drink, we party, and sometimes we do things we don't remember. We moved in together in August. The house had 3 floors, plus a basement that was padlocked by the owners. At first, it made sense. We would definitely have parties in the basement, and the lock kept things manageable. The house itself was great. Good location to the school and work, not too expensive, and in good condition. But there were a few things I didn't consider. I had never lived with this many people before. Just one roommate. So I was used to noticing when something was misplaced or moved. But here, it was different. Things started to get weird. At first, it was just my snacks. I would find that they were either half gone or completely missing. I was annoyed, but in a house with so many people, I just let it slide. But as time went on, it got worse. The other girls and I started making passive-aggressive comments to each other about who was eating our food. It became a running joke, but really, we were all frustrated. No one wanted to start a fight over snacks, especially in a house full of girls. I work odd hours as a CNA in the NICU, getting off late, usually around 11 p.m. on weekdays. One night, after a particularly exhausting shift, I returned home around 11:30, desperate to collapse into bed. As soon as I walked in, I saw someone standing in the kitchen, but I was too tired to care, assuming it was just one of my roommates. I figured I'd just go straight to my room and avoid any long-winded conversation. But when I reached the second floor, I noticed something strange. All of my roommates' doors were closed. That usually meant they were either asleep or in their rooms. I felt a prickling sensation, a nagging doubt creeping into my mind. They were all asleep, right? I texted our house group chat to ask if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt ridiculous asking such a simple question. But when 2 of my roommates responded saying no, and the others confirmed they were already asleep, I knew something was wrong. That wasn't one of my roommates in the kitchen. My heart pounded in my chest. I dialed 911, but I didn't press call. Instead, I tiptoed across the hall to my roommate's room. Thankfully, her door was unlocked. I whispered to her, telling her I thought someone was in the house. Her eyes went wide, and she nearly started crying. She hadn't noticed anything strange, but for context, our neighborhood wasn't exactly safe. Just weeks earlier, there had been a shooting 2 doors down. She mouthed for me to call. So, I did. The whole time, we stayed eerily silent, listening for any movement. There was nothing, just silence. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I was just exhausted from my shift, imagining things in my foggy state. The operator reassured me they were sending someone right away. It's a dangerous city, so right away actually meant now. I didn't want to go downstairs, but when the police arrived, I knew I had to. I swear, I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I descended the stairs. The officers searched the house, and when they asked if there were any other floors, we mentioned the basement. It was padlocked, but I quickly added, "It's locked, though." They checked the basement anyway. I still remember the hollow, sick feeling in my stomach when they came back upstairs, pale-faced. The lock on the basement had been pulled off, and the door left ajar. No one had ever checked it, since we rarely went out back. Inside, the officers found a man. He had been living there for God knows how long. He had taken a comforter from one of my roommates, a mattress from who knows where, and was living in the basement, hiding just out of sight. His clothes, his belongings. He had been stealing our food and using our kitchen in the middle of the night. It made sense now. Pans left out, snack wrappers everywhere. Things moved around. He had been getting bolder, leaving more traces behind. He started getting comfortable. It's almost like he didn't care about hiding his tracks anymore. But the scariest part was realizing that none of us ever locked our doors. He had access to any one of us at any time, and we had no idea. When the police arrested him, I was the only one brave enough to go down and look. I wish I hadn't. I took a picture of him being arrested to show the roommates who were too scared to go down. This is the man who had been living in our house, right under our noses. This is the scariest experience I've ever had, and I still tell people about it when I meet them at bars. Most laugh and don't believe me, but others are intrigued and want every detail. I swear this is true, and my roommates can vouch for it. A few years ago, I went to college in Kentucky, in one of the biggest cities there. The area between the university and downtown was called Old Louisville, a neighborhood filled with grand historic homes, some well-maintained, others not so much. Many had been split into apartments, and one of these converted mansions is where my story begins. I lived with 2 other girls and one guy in a huge 3-bedroom, 2-story apartment. The place was a mess, but the rent was only $200 each, including utilities, and it was just a mile from campus. Our apartment was massive, over 2,500 square feet, and the building had a 3rd-floor apartment that was vacant, plus one on the 1st floor. When you entered through the large front door, 2 huge staircases greeted you, leading up to the bedrooms and kitchen. One of the staircases led to the vacant 3rd floor, sealed from the inside. There was even a stained glass window on the landing, adding to the eerie vibe. But the most important part of the layout was the staircase that led to our basement. When we first moved in, we noticed that the basement staircase was blocked by paint cans and random supplies. We didn't pay it much attention at first, but after a month of living there, the landlord still hadn't come to clear his stuff. We forgot about it until one night when we got drunk and played hide and seek. Q, one of the girls, and I all worked graveyard shifts at the same warehouse. This meant we often came home around 4 or 5 a.m., and our 4th roommate spent most of her nights with her boyfriend, leaving our apartment empty from midnight to 5 a.m. But over time, strange things began disappearing. Not just small things like socks, but bigger items, cleaning supplies, bowls, even entire rolls of toilet paper. At first, we laughed it off, but after a few weeks, it became unsettling. There was a constant feeling that someone was in our home, moving things around when we weren't there. One weekend, we threw a party. Around midnight, after everyone was drunk, I had the brilliant idea to play hide and seek. As I turned off the lights in the house, I realized one light was still on in the back staircase, leading to the basement. Feeling uneasy, I called out for Q to grab his gun and help me check it out. In hindsight, it was a terrible idea to have a drunken college student with a gun. But at that moment, I felt brave. We crept down the dusty staircase, hitting spider webs along the way. The light was coming from the basement, but a screen door blocked our entry. It seemed like our landlord had sealed it with caulk, so we easily removed it. I let Q take the lead since he had the gun. The rest of our party followed silently behind us. We descended about 7 or 8 flights of stairs into a large basement. On the left, a lamp without its shade sat on an old end table next to a filthy mattress. When Q tripped over a box, hundreds of used needles spilled out onto the floor. The realization hit us. Someone was living down here. And then we saw it, our missing cleaning supplies, dishes, and toilet paper. We spent the next half hour exploring the basement, finding odd items like an old TV with bent antennas and a photo album full of strangers' smiling faces. But then, I found something that made my blood run cold. A manila folder containing release papers from prison. The mugshot on the top belonged to a man who had been released just 2 months earlier. His charges? Assault, drug trafficking, and domestic violence. We called the police, and they quickly discovered a door in the basement that led to an unlocked backlot we never used. It turned out, while we were out, the man had been entering through the basement, taking our supplies from the kitchen and bedrooms. We were lucky he never confronted us directly, but the fact that he was living right under us, taking what he wanted while we were asleep, is something I'll never forget. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. But be careful, because sometimes the things we fear in stories have a way of finding us in real life.